the mountains are talking to us all the time, and they don't hide anything. All the signs and signals are out there. We just have to see them and hear them and feel them and interpret them. I'm not a hunter, but I think some of my friends that are really into hunting, they almost become like one with the animal, the breathing and the smell and the scent. I feel like that. I'm the same way when it comes to being out in the mountains. I like to feel like I'm plugged in. It's funny, if you watch the blockbuster movie Avatar, the people, they're plugged into nature. They're connected to the natural environment around them in a way I'd like to think humans were, thousands of years ago.
Welcome to Season 13, Episode 3 of the Backcountry Podcast. I'm Adam Howard. In the skiing universe, Chris Davenport is a household name. His notoriety is due in part to the many facets of the sport upon which he's had a lasting impact. He raced for New Hampshire's Holderness Academy and then the University of Colorado before transitioning to freeskiing, where he'd win 2 world championships in 1996 and 2001. Along the way, he became the first American Red Bull athlete and found his way into more than 30 ski films from Warren Miller and Matchsticks Productions. And that just scratches the surface of Dav's decades of dominance. He eventually moved on from competitive freeskiing to focus on high-profile backcountry objectives, like skiing Colorado's 54 14ers in less than a year, then going on to ski the 100 highest peaks in the state. He authored a book about that 14er project and co-authored 50 Classic Ski Descents of North America, which has of course been made famous by Cody Townsend and Bjarne Solin. Today, Dav applies his decades of experience and passion for skiing in a multitude of ways. He's a ski guide, television host and announcer, and ski entrepreneur. And more recently, he's taken on a role at Peak Skis alongside Bodie Miller to focus on their backcountry product. We sat down after our recent trip to Antarctica, where he started pioneering lines in 2008. We'd like to thank Arva for supporting this episode and independent media. For 35 years, Arva has been at the forefront of designing and developing snow safety equipment. But now their commitment to safety goes a step further with a campaign that touches the hearts of adventurers and their loved ones alike. Inspired by the relationship between Arva athlete and 2-time freeride world tour champion Aurélien Decroix and his mother, Safer for You, Better for Mom reflects Arva's deep understanding of the dual nature of mountain passion, the irresistible draw for explorers, and the legitimate concern families have for the safety of their loved ones. Arva's message urges us to listen to our inner voice of caution, that little voice that guides us toward prudence. It's the voice of our loved ones, which even in the silence of snow-covered mountains reminds us of the importance of safety and sound decision-making. By choosing Arva, you honor the call of the mountains while weaving in an invisible yet resilient thread that connects you, the adventurer, to those who eagerly await your return. Safer for You, Better for Mom embodies this dual commitment, the promise of exploration and the peaceful return to your loved ones. Learn more at arva-equipment.com or check out #SaferForYou. All right, friends, let's get into it. We hope you enjoy this new episode. Chris Davenport, welcome to the Backcountry Podcast.
Thanks, Howie. Great to be on here with you.
So the last time we saw one another, we were on a boat. We're coming off a boat in Ushuaia, Argentina, and we just been to Antarctica, which I've tried not to use the term trip of a lifetime or bucket list really at all, because there's, to me, always something else and something interesting. And this really did take the cake for me. and I'm still processing it. It's been 2 weeks now. You've been down there a lot, starting in 2008. Just for the audience, this gentleman, Doug Stout, Ice Axe Expeditions, started this guide company in the early to mid 2000s, and one of the trips he pioneered was this taking a converted research vessel from Ushuaia down through the Drake Passage to the peninsula that comes up out of Antarctica. You had the good fortune of being on that first boat, which broke down, and the trip didn't happen. But for you, the trip did happen. Take us through that.
Yeah, that was a wild experience for almost all of us that were down there in Ushuaia, guides and clients included. It was our first time to Antarctica. Of course, as you mentioned, Doug Stout had started ice axe expeditions. He had been down to Antarctica many times already at that point in 2008, but had finally come up with this idea of the ski cruise, which was, taking an old cruise ship and filling it with skiers. So like the theme of the cruise, if you will, is going skiing. And we were going to sail across the Drake Passage down to Antarctica and go skiing. And so we had this, old sort of Mediterranean style small cruise ship. It's called the Orlova. And none of us guides and probably very few of the clients had been on a cruise ship before. And so, we didn't know the difference if this thing was a piece of junk or if this is, it was fine. We got on it and we were psyched and ready to go. And we didn't depart that night. And there ended up being a big party on the boat. And we figured we would be underway at some point in the middle of the night, but we all woke up that next morning and we're still on the dock. So we're going, okay, something's going wrong here. And there starts to be rumors going around of mechanical issue with the ship. And pretty soon, I think it was maybe that afternoon, the captain and the crew came around and said, "Hey guys, unfortunately, we've got a major mechanical malfunction and the boat is not being certified to leave by I think it was the Argentinian Navy or whoever has to certify that thing. And we're canceling the trip." And the collective sigh of disbelief and sadness was something I think I've never experienced before. I mean, people had come so far, spent quite a bit of money. Of course, people had travel insurance and things like that, so they were going to get their money back. But I felt so bad for Doug, whose vision of this trip had been going on for so long, and it was now a reality. And off, here we were off to Antarctica, and all of a sudden the trip's canceled. It was just, it was terrible. So most of the people, rebooked their flights and ended up flying home. Myself and a few of the other guides, I think there was about 8 of us. We talked to the charter company. They had another ship coming into Ushuaia, and that was going to be full of just normal cruise tourists and was going to Antarctica. And we convinced them to let us come along on that trip. They had space and ski. We ended up staying in Ushuaia for I think 5 or 6 more days, and then getting on this other ship called the Sergei Vavilov. And it was a converted Russian science vessel, basically, that it was built for doing ultrasonic experiments, I guess, underwater. So, but it was really comfortable. And so to make a long story short, we ended up going on the Vavilov and sailing to Antarctica. And what I saw down there absolutely blew my mind. I sort of, at the time, and even now, I kind of pride myself on being a student of mountains, and I know a lot about the mountains of the planet. I've been to a lot of the great mountain ranges and climbed and skied, and for some reason I didn't know anything about the Antarctic Peninsula, and I didn't know how beautiful it was. I didn't know how big the mountains were, how glaciated, how much wildlife, all of the things. And so I fell in love with it immediately and vowed to come back, and of course did come back the next year and many years after that. One last footnote, the Orlova, this cruise ship that we were supposed to go on that broke, ended up getting dragged out to the harbor in Ushuaia, and it sat under anchor in Ushuaia for 2 years. So I came back the next year and there's the Orlova still sitting there in the harbor and still broken. And then finally at some point it got sold. I don't know how these things work, but it got sold and it got dragged because it was broken. It couldn't go under its own power. It got dragged up into the North Atlantic, where over a period of years, it broke loose from its tugboat or barge or whatever was dragging it up there, and it floated around the North Atlantic. And it had a beacon, like a GPS beacon or whatever. So they kind of knew where it was. And then all of a sudden the beacon turned off. And so the boat disappeared. It ended up sinking at some point. And I don't know if that was an insurance scam or what, but there was a great New York Times article about this ghost ship floating out in the North Atlantic, apparently with a lot of rats living on it. And that was the ship that we were supposed to sail to Antarctica on. So, oh gosh, I don't know if it was fate that we didn't go on that ship or what, but I'm kind of glad looking back. Nowadays, as you know, Howie, since you were just with me down there, we have much more sophisticated, newer ships that we sail down there on that are a lot safer and a lot more stable. And so, yeah, it was a sad start to the Ice Axe Expedition ski cruise. But, we came back again, and now it's been, 12 years that the cruise has been running. And it's just one of the most exceptional ski trips that you can do in the world. And you mentioned it. I mean, do you say trip of a lifetime? Well, a lot of the people that come on that trip will say that is the most incredible adventure journey that they've ever been on. And I agree. And I keep coming back year after year, and it continues to blow my mind.
I really don't know what could compare. I mean, between the sailing or cruising across the Drake, which can be really rowdy. I mean, let's face it, it's one of the harshest seaways in the world, or if not the harshest. You went down there again on a sailboat, though. And what year was that?
That was 2009. So that was the following year. As I said, I basically fell in love with the peninsula on that first trip. And what I saw, I just was like astounded at how much potential there was down there for not just for skiing, but for first descents. I mean, everywhere. There's very few mountain ranges in the world where there's that much potential left to ski things that have never been skied. And so I came back the next year and chartered a sailboat with some friends, a couple other professional skiers, Andrea Binning and Stian Hagen, and a film crew and a writer, our friend Rob Story. Yeah, we just went down there as a small expedition of 8 people on a 70-foot sailboat, a ketch, steel-hulled ketch. And when you and I just went, it took us, 48 hours or 45 hours to sail across the Drake Passage. When we went down on the sailboat, it took us, I think, 75 hours, or it was 4 days, maybe 80 hours, something like that, to sail across. And it was a lot rougher just because of the small size of the craft. But it also had a much more of a adventurous feel. The boat was ours. We could go wherever we wanted. So we really could pull into these bays and explore and look around and spend time trying to figure out how to ski certain lines. And so, yeah, we pioneered a bunch of first descents and went quite a bit further south along the peninsula than we did on the ski cruise. Yeah, but it was rough. And I'll never forget leaving to sail back across the Drake. We'd had 25 days down there of skiing in relatively calm water. And within an hour of sailing out of the peninsula and into the open ocean, the boat started rocking and rolling and everyone started puking. The next 4 days, we were not feeling very good, but you all have to take a watch and help cook and do everything on the sailboat. And I love that. So I would point to that as probably my top 5 adventurous trips of all time.
This trip is kind of marketed as an expedition. Kind of is. And I suppose it's relative. It's about what you want to make of it, but it's posh. The ship is insane. The skiing is tame. We're not pushing any limits per se. Crevasse danger is probably your biggest abject hazard outside of the water. The water presents, on those Zodiacs coming for landings. That's obviously a hazard. There's a risk there. When you were down there in 2009, you guys were skiing some much higher risk terrain. What were some of your considerations as a skier, knowing that, if something goes wrong there, the chances of rescue are, at least in the short term, 0?
There's basically 0 chance of a rescue down there. You have to self-rescue and get yourself out of any situation. So we were certainly aware of that, aware of the exposure down there. And although we were skiing and trying to ski some pretty rowdy lined, no fall zones, it's not free ride skiing like you see in the movies. It's ski mountaineering. It's, one turn at a time. You're not trying to ski fast or hit big airs or things like that. You're trying to, descend in a controlled environment and in a controlled manner and enjoy being out on the edge. So I personally find in my career that I was much more at risk when I was, stepping on the throttle, if you will, and skiing fast and charging for a ski movie segment, trying to make it look exciting. And, when things go wrong there and you end up tomahawking down a steep slope or, you can get injured. Yeah, we just couldn't have that in Antarctica. And so this was much more, mountaineering, climbing with ice axes and crampons, and then, getting the skis on and locking the toes and just being kind of out there, one turn at a time on some really steep and exposed slopes. And I love that. I mean, that's a huge part of, who I am as a skier, is doing that type of ski mountaineering where it's much more controlled descending, and it's equally fun. I get the same kind of adrenaline rush or the same just stoke from a controlled mountaineering descent as I would get from, something fast and exciting in Alaska or in the Alps or something.
It's interesting as you're talking about this and setting the scene. I'm thinking about some clips I watched of you skiing in an extreme comp. Maybe it was the World Championships that you won a couple times, the first of which was 96, I believe.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I'm a free ski coach and I've been to a bunch of comps and I follow the Free Ride World Tour and I'm watching you ski. And granted, like, we're on skis in 96. We're just getting into some of the more, interesting shapes on skis. You're on straight skis at that time. What skis were you on?
I was on a pair of Dynastar G9 giant slalom skis, basically. That was the performance ski. Fortunately, when I won that first world title in Alaska, the conditions were not that good. It was kind of firm. So actually a GS ski was pretty good. But you're right. By 97, we started having some shape skis, kind of the first wider skis. And when I say wide, I'm talking about 85, 90. It wasn't until, years later that we started pushing over 100.
Do you follow the Free Ride World Tour at all?
Yep, I follow it. I like to watch the live streams, follow some of the athletes. Yeah, I mean, it's a very important part of my career, being a competitive free ride skier, doing the circuit, and I fell in love with that. And I don't know if I told you the story of my first competition in Crested Butte in 1994.
Tell our listener about that.
So I had, raced in high school.
I was there, by the way, for that.
Yeah, exactly. Growing up in New England and New Hampshire, I was a ski racer, and on the kind of the Eastern Cup FIS circuit in high school, we'd race against racers from all over. And one of the guys I got to know in high school racing was Shane McConkey. Shane was at Burke Mountain Academy in Vermont, and we would see each other in the weekends and kind of got to know each other casually. But then we ended up as freshmen at the University of Colorado together on the ski team at CU Boulder. And so became even much closer friends there. And through the next couple of years in Boulder, hung out a lot, trained a lot, skied a lot together. He ended up dropping out of college and moving to Vail and doing some mogul skiing and just doing all types of different things. And of course, getting into the competitive free skiing scene in Crested Butte in Alaska. But in 94, I graduated from CU and moved to Aspen. And Shane called me up that winter and said, "Hey, Chris, we're going down to Crested Butte for the US Extremes. You should come." And competitive skiing wasn't even on my radar. I didn't really even know about the US Extreme Skiing Championships. Maybe I'd heard of WESC up in Alaska, the World Extreme Skiing Championships. But I was like, yeah, Shane, that sounds amazing. So I signed up and I drove down to Crested Butte and did my first free ski competition and just fell in love with the people. I felt like I'd found my crew, and I had a great mind for competition. I'd been doing it all my life. I knew what it was like to sit in the starting gate and focus and memorize a line. And so I had this kind of skill set that I had built through ski racing that was really worked well also for free skiing. And so fell in love with that, went down to Las Leñas, Argentina that summer and just was like, okay, I think this is what I'm going to do. But it was because Shane called me up and got me down to Crested Butte in 94.
Did you keep racing?
I did not. Well, yes, actually I did. So we have a town series here in Aspen, a town race series. It's kind of, you might call it like a beer league type of thing. So I was doing those races. And then I was also got into doing this endurance skiing, the 24 Hours of Aspen, which was the World Endurance Skiing Championships, I guess they called it. But it was basically, how many laps can you ski on Aspen Mountain top to bottom in 24 hours nonstop. And I got second in 96 in that. And then I ended up winning it with my partner, Tyler Williams, who also was a Western State graduate, Gunnison.
Oh, yeah.
Ended up winning it with Tyler in 1998. That's definitely the hardest physical endurance, anything I've ever done. And it was really exciting.
And really, the risk is real.
Super high. Yeah. Going 95 miles an hour, 93 miles an hour in the middle of the night, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, when you've already done 70 laps and each lap is 3,200 vert. Yeah, it's really, really dangerous. And they don't do it anymore, probably for good reason.
It's like the Servodka downhill at Jay Peak, where all the net on the course was Bud Light snow fence with a telephone pole in the finish corral that you had to shut it down and get around. Those days are gone. And probably as parents, maybe we think that's a good thing, but certainly it's a bummer to think that kind of thing is gone. But now we have, this super high level of skiing in the Free Ride World Tour and here in North America in the IFSA comps, the qualifiers. combination of essentially big mountain and slope style, which is what it's become, is still staggering. And frankly, the risk is so massive because if you get hurt, you're off the tour. You might get an injury wild card. It's hard to do the calculus on that, trying to get to the pro level, trying to be a pro skier and establish a career because, in your day, when you started out, I should say, you had to kind of prove your bona fides to get sponsors. And then maybe you could just focus on film and going on trips and that sort of thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is just my journalist assessment of it. Today, it's not that way, right? It's almost like you just got to love competition so much. That's why you want to do it. And yes, there's a chance you could, become that pro that's high profile and doing all this stuff. But there are easier paths through social media now. How does that sit with you?
Well, I think it's a natural evolution of the sport. Yeah, certainly, as you said, back in the 90s, one way to get noticed by the industry, sponsors and media and things was to win these big events. And certainly that played a huge role in myself becoming a full-time professional skier, making a living. That didn't happen until I had won that World Extreme Skiing Championships and was able to begin calling up brands and, creating partnerships and relationships and working for them. But to your point about the evolution of the sport, I definitely saw that happening at the latter part of my competitive career. I competed for 13 seasons, I think. And the last free ski competition I did was the Verbier Extreme, which was like the Freeride World Tour final. And that was in 2007. I had a couple of great runs and was in the lead until this French guy who was a friend of mine and fellow competitor, Seb Michaud, came down and threw like a 50-foot backflip and just stomped it. And I couldn't do that. It really wasn't in my repertoire of skills. And he ended up winning and I got second, which was still great. But I saw the writing on the wall that like, if you couldn't throw big backflips and spins and start really tricking off of, features on the mountain, you were probably not going to be winning anymore. So I was pretty happy to move on from competing after so many years when I started seeing that. And as you said, now it's like slope style on the big mountains. And it's just incredible to watch people's comfort level in really difficult, really complex terrain and, throwing double backflips and stopping them in narrow landing areas. And the rise of human athleticism, it seems like in all sports has really gone through the roof. It hasn't been linear. It's been like on this curve, just going, like a rocket ship in the last decade or couple decades. There was a great book that I read a few years ago by Stephen Kotler, The Rise of Superman. And it talks about how humans have just, really accelerated doing all these incredible things and feats and in sports. And we've seen this certainly in skiing.
I really want to talk about road bike racing.
Yeah, another one of my passions.
Well, so let's go there. I'm thinking as you're talking, like, okay, you got airbag training, you got the pool, you got all the facilities that these kids have access to that you never did. You got the skiing down as a racer, and that was enough for quite a long time. I mean, 13 years, let's face it, that's a stretch. And to think that you could not only have a career where you were that successful for that long, but also not like blow yourself up, it's amazing. I watch the Grand Tours. I follow bike racing in Europe. Was bummed about GCN announcing they were shutting down.
I saw that, yeah.
Which is a bummer. But the average pace of today's peloton is far greater than it was during the major doping era up until the early to mid aughts. And a lot of that, you can be a skeptic, and there are certainly skeptics that think there's still juicing happening at a high level. But the fact of the matter is these guys aren't even really drinking water on the bike anymore. They've got these potions they're pounding, and it's staggering the level of complexity and science supporting sport at that level. And really in all of World Cup racing, same.
No, you're absolutely right. It's very impressive to watch, and I still ride my bike every day and love, watching professional cycling of all sorts. And yeah, I mean, when I grew up, my ski coach, when I was probably 13 or 14, told myself and my teammates to ride bikes in the summer as training. And at my high school, Holderness school in New Hampshire, we actually had an incredible cycling team, road bike racing. We won the New England high school championships many years in a row. And A lot of my teammates went on to become professional cyclists, including Tyler Hamilton, who I grew up with since like fifth grade, ski racing and bike racing. And so we loved that. And when I got out to college in Boulder, in Colorado, I continued bike racing, although the road level out here in Colorado was quite a bit higher. And so I kind of transitioned to mountain bike racing out here. I basically grew up going to races with Tyler, with George Hincapie, with Christian Vandevelde, raced in the U.S. National Championships with Lance, and we were all the same age. And I made a conscious decision after my freshman year of college where I tried to bike race and ski race. The level was too high. I couldn't do both. And so I just stuck with skiing and decided I was just going to kind of mountain bike race and, have some more fun with that. It was probably a good decision because I probably would have been one of those people if I continued bike racing who would have been caught up in the doping era like all the other ones were. And of course, in competitive free skiing, we didn't really have to use substances to ski well.
Yeah, gravity was your drug, right?
Yep.
Let's get back to your career a little bit. I think it goes without saying that you've been at it a long time, and from a distance, as I've watched and followed your career, I've always marveled at that. One of the things I've noted is staying relevant, right, is the key. And you've done a good job like transitioning to, you have a nice social media following. You've kind of augmented your competitive career with, guiding and taking on these projects, which was like, that was your big transition coming out of the free ski or extreme ski part of your life. But when it comes to getting sponsors, that's the real trick, right? To not have to, start being a real estate agent or something, right?
Yep. Like most of my friends.
And I'm sure that you've had your tough times, right? Kesley is a great example. And I'd say the same thing about Bodie Miller. I would argue you've been far more successful at getting good products, surrounding yourself with good products and good people. Kesley was a great example of that. Like when that started, I was like, okay, is there room for a brand like that that's going to make a product like that in North America? Do you have like a spidey sense as to like what's going to work and what's not? And now you're on to Peak Skis, Nerona, both. Yep. Frankly, Peak Skis is another good one. Like I was like, okay, let's see, great product. How do you do it?
I think I've always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit in me, and I love the ski industry so much. I'm so passionate about the sport and about the business of skiing. I always have been. And my grandfather was involved in the ski industry as a part owner of Mount Cranmore, New Hampshire. And my dad had kind of done some stuff in the ski business as well. And we just kind of grew up around skiing. So it was always something that I knew a lot about and I love. And I'm always looking for opportunities, as a young skier, I was always looking for opportunities. And you mentioned Kesley, I had been skiing on Solomon for many years. I think, gosh, how many was it? Maybe a dozen years, and had a great relationship with Solomon. But it's a big company. And in 2007, I think, the founder of Kesley 2.0, let's call it, because Kesley, of course, is an 80-year-old Austrian brand, but they went out of business in the late 90s. They were owned by the Benetton family from Italy, who also owned Nordica. And they basically just shut Kesley down. They didn't sell it. They just closed the doors. And so Kesley was out of business. So three Austrian guys got together, and they all had worked at Fisher Skis, and they got together over beers one night and they said, hey, what about buying Kesley and bringing it back? It's a reputable brand. They worked for about a year to raise some money and ended up, buying the intellectual property from Benetton and launching Kesley. And one of the first people that they called, actually the first person they called to open the US or North American business, was me. I guess they had a lot of respect for what I had done in skiing and saw me as a potential partner. And so I saw that as a great opportunity to sort of further my career in skiing and in the business of skiing. One of the guys, the president at the time, Siggy Rumphuber, he flew down to Portillo, Chile, and met me and brought their first prototypes that they had made. And the skis were incredible. I mean, I'm a product guy. I really love good product. And I love testing and the product development process. And I got on those skis and was just like, wow, these are like a next level. I put my wife skied on them. A couple of my other coaches down there skied on them, and everyone was like, really impressed. So once I had, checked that box, the product quality is good. I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's see if we can't build a really good business. So yeah, for the first basically year and a half, I was sales, I was marketing, I was doing our Las Vegas trade show. I was kind of running that business for the US while still obviously, skiing full time. And the growth of Kesley was awesome. For the first, 8 or 10 years, we really grew pretty quickly. I ended up becoming part owner in the business. And then in 2017 or 2018, they really wanted to grow a lot more and we needed to raise a lot more money to do that. So they ended up selling to a Czech investor. So I cashed out and stayed with the brand, but we sold the company. And then once we did that, I started kind of seeing some changes. It's oftentimes what happens when a smaller privately held company, sells and is owned by a bigger company or private equity or a corporation of some sort. You lose a little bit of the soul. And so I kind of saw that happening. And at the same time, I had been talking to Bodie Miller about some project that he had going on. And one of those things over the couple years became Peak Skis, which we launched a year and a half ago or so. And so, I left Kesley to help start Peak and partner up with Bodie. And that's been a really fun process as well. And again, it goes back to the product. When I first skied the first prototypes that they made at Peak, I was like, okay, these are legit. And here's another chance to start a new business with a different business model, direct to consumer. And it's been going great. And it's just been a big part of my career, the business side, doing these deals and using whatever skills I have from, my education in school and learning about the ski business to help grow these things.
How were you influenced by your father and grandfather on the business side? And did they, as you became an adult and a pro skier, were they like talking in your ear or were they just sitting on your shoulder?
They were more sitting on my shoulder. Yeah, they were in the background. I mean, my grandfather in particular was a very astute businessman and loved skiing and was a very hard worker. And so, I just kind of looked up to the way he held himself in that space. But no, once I sort of became a professional skier, I mean, growing up in New England, I think there's a lot of tradition. And I think people think you're going to graduate from college and get what I would put in air quotes, a real job. But I had, been out in Colorado and then moved to a ski town and had no intention of moving back to New England and becoming a real estate agent or a banker in Boston or anything like that. I was pretty set on figuring out how I could create a profession that would allow me to ski every day. Like literally, if I got a tattoo on my body, it would be that quote. I'm going to try to do whatever I can to try to ski every day. And I still live by that mantra. The business of skiing for me is what I like to call the business of fun. It's just been so much fun personally, but also sharing it with people, sharing it with brands. My wife likes to tease me like, oh yeah, you're in the business of fun, but not in the business of making money. Because obviously as a professional skier, it's not private equity or it's not real estate or all other professions where you could make a lot more money. But
your wife's a ski patroller.
She's a ski patroller. So
okay. So we'll take that with a grain of salt.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. She's a longtime ski patroller in Aspen and she loves what she does as well. So we both love skiing, as much as anyone probably could.
Jeremy Jones said recently, I didn't start a snowboard company to not snowboard, which I thought was awesome because, one of the things when I was a professional ski patroller right out of college, went to school for journalism and I went to Western State and to ski Crested Butte. That was it. It was pretty simple. I also have the New England connections. I was startled when I got into when I started going to trade shows, right? And you see these guys and they're not skiing. It's like, why would you be in the ski industry if you're not skiing? Because it's a couple steps above poverty in many cases, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. There's the old saying that you probably remember that was like, if you want to ski a lot, don't work in the ski industry.
Right. Absolutely.
Because a lot of these jobs are sort of sexy sounding. I'm working for a big ski brand or whatever, but the work itself is oftentimes sitting behind a desk and pushing spreadsheets and going to trade shows and hopefully you get to go to some on snow demos or some ski tests or things like that. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to work in an office. I wanted to have the mountains be my office. And I've been able to do that in lots of different ways.
Let's throw it back a little bit to your transition out of the extreme comp world Let's throw it back a little bit to your transition when you decided in Verbier that this was probably the end of the road after 13 years, which is an exceptional run in that game. What was that transition like, both from like, okay, what are my sponsors going to think, to what am I going to do next? And of course, what you did next was some of these really ambitious projects, ski the 14ers in Colorado, and you went to Europe and skied a bunch of really classic summits, essentially. What was that process like for you?
I think that the evolution was very natural for me in sort of 2004, 5, 6, let's call it 2004, 2005. I just began feeling a little jaded with, I don't know, my ski career in a way. And it sounds strange to say that because it's so exciting and it had been going really well. But I was sort of sick of the same old every season, which was follow the Freeride World Tour, do these competitions, and then work with film companies like Matchstick Productions and Warren Miller to get film segments. And I'd been doing that for a decade or more and was kind of looking for something else in skiing to motivate me, to inspire me. And I've always been a goal setter. So, writing down lists of things I want to accomplish and really being goal oriented. And in the summer, or I guess it was maybe the fall of 2005, I was out on a mountain bike ride by myself, and I was thinking about my goals for the coming season. And I was just like, I don't really want to just go on film trips. And it's kind of been kind of dangerous. I'd been in a couple avalanches at that point and was just like, I don't know. As I'm having these thoughts, all of a sudden this word creeps into my mind, and the word was 14ers. And I sort of had this really like an epiphany, which was like the idea of trying to climb and ski all the 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado. And now, just to add a little historical context, growing up in New Hampshire, we had always gone up to Mount Washington and Tuckerman Ravine. I had been really into rock climbing and kind of general mountaineering, was a lover of Climbing Magazine back in the day, and was, kind of inspired by doing all things in the mountains well, not just skiing. And so I had this background of climbing and mountaineering, and I had climbed a lot of the 14ers already in the summer, and I'd skied a number of them already. But I had this idea that really came from a mentor of mine, Lou Dawson. Lou was the first person to ski the 14ers, all of them. And he is kind of a generation before me in ski mountaineering. But I felt like doing something outside of the box. And even at the time when I started calling my sponsors, people like Red Bull and Solomon, they were like, what? We don't really know what that is. What are you going to do? Do people get that? And so it took some convincing, but I felt like this was going to be something that would be exceptionally challenging for me personally and rewarding. It would be really, really difficult. That would create, 54 individual stories that I could share. Every peak is different. Every ski descent is different. It was a great opportunity to create media around it. I mean, this is sort of pre-internet, or certainly pre-social media. We did have the internet because I was blogging about all of these ski descents. Yeah, I couldn't get it out of my head. And I actually came back from that mountain bike ride and walked into the kitchen, and my wife was there, and I was like, I have this great idea I got on this bike ride. I know what I'm going to do this winter. And she's like, at the time, I think she was also looking to me to back off on the risk taking and perhaps look at getting a real job, as again, in air quotes. And I had actually had a couple job offers from a couple real estate firms and a financial services firm, and had done some interviews and sat in some offices to kind of check it out. So I was thinking about that, but I just said, Jesse, I've got this great idea. I'm going to try to climb and ski all the 14ers this season. And she, like, her jaw hit the floor. She was like, I thought you were trying to take less risk, not more. And I was like,
Yeah.
Gosh, I know, you're always right. Yeah. Okay. So I sort of had to go back to square one in my mind and say, is this really something that I should do? But I couldn't get it out of my head. And so I pushed forward, and that became my goal for the winter of 2006. And I was still filming that winter, and I did some free ride competitions that winter while still trying to climb and ski all these peaks. And so it was a really busy winter, but I was more inspired than I had been in probably a decade. I was just loving it. I was loving the challenge, the camping, the climbing, the ski descents. And I was trying to ski them all in one season. Ended up getting, I think, 45 or 46 out of the 54 done. and then came back at the beginning of the following winter and finished off the rest with, I think, just 2 or 3 days left to go in that year, that 365-day period. And I didn't know it going into it, but it became sort of a defining thing in my career. Oh, he's the guy who skied all the 14ers in less than a year. And so I was the second person to finish them all. Lou Dawson had done it. It took him 13 years to do it. He wasn't trying to do it fast. He was just, ticking them off when he could. And then I finished it in a short period of time, and it sort of jump-started a very small, very niche ski mountaineering scene in the United States. There just wasn't many people doing it. The equipment wasn't very good at the time, but companies started paying attention. And within a couple of years, the lightweight skis, the lightweight boots that actually performed well. We were importing more, pin system bindings into the States, and everything started growing. And I think my project was a bit of a catalyst for that. The book that I wrote, Ski the 14ers, sold incredibly well. And I certainly didn't go into the project with a book in mind. It was only sort of halfway through that I started thinking, wow, I've got all this content. There's these great stories from every peak. I've always wanted to write a book. I didn't know what it would be about, but that became a reality. And like I said, it sold really well. And so it was kind of the 2.0 of my career, 1.0 being, ski racing into competitive free skiing and filming. And then, getting really into ski mountaineering and trying to see where I could take that on all 7 continents. And now I've transitioned a little bit out of the mountaineering projects. And I guess if we were to call it a 3.0 segment of my career, it's been becoming a guide and for the last 10 years, taking people on ski trips all over the world and sharing my experience and my passion of skiing with them. And I love that. I feel like with guiding, it's much safer for me because I'm within my comfort zone. I might be able to push my clients, but I'm still alive after all those years of doing pretty dangerous things. And I don't want to mess it up now. So I just like being in the guide space. It just feels like something I was meant to do and really enjoying it now.
The guide space, one of the things from the trip that we were just on that I'll briefly explain to the listener, there's maybe, I would guess 80-ish clients and media and maybe 20, 25 guides. And this cadre of guides from around the world is exceptional. And it's pretty diverse as far as age and where people are from, obviously very white. My take was that you guys it's one of the rare opportunities you have to come together on a trip and celebrate one another and also what and share information and work together and party together. It seems like where else would something like this exist in guiding other than maybe a heli situation, which is quite different culturally. Let's face it. Is there anything like it for guides?
I don't think so, because it's a specific trip where you've got all of these people with a shared mission of getting clients out there in really heavily glaciated and dangerous terrain and trying to keep them safe. And so of course, as you said, there are institutional guide services, namely heli ski operations, cat ski operations, a few large mountaineering guide services like on Mount Rainier or in the Tetons. But oftentimes guides are working independently, going on trips with clients.
Night, right?
Yep, exactly. And you may see each other at a guide training early season or something like that, but then you're kind of off doing your thing. And so this trip is unique and really special because we all love and respect each other so much. And it's so fun to see each other and hang out and share stories and share skills and go. We do our guide training down in Argentina and Ushuaia before the trip. And it's just a pleasure to work with, as you said, such a diverse group, from people that really just ski guide to IFMGA guides in the Alps who do a lot of climbing to, people who are ski touring in Norway and, Scandinavia and different places. And it's one of my favorite trips, if not my favorite trip that I get to do every year, really for that reason. Of course, the location is incredibly special, Antarctic Peninsula, but the group of people that ISACS brings together to work together is just amazing. We have a couple guide chats going on WhatsApp and they're just hilarious. And these people have become some of my closest friends.
In that space, who are some of your mentors? And I know the list is probably very long, and I'd say this because one of the great privileges I've had, because I'm just an average skier, just an average person, is being around such exceptional skiers and humans throughout my career. Who are some of those folks that you've guided with or been on that trip that you're like, okay, this guy, I can learn so much, and wow, he's got the whole package or she's got the whole package. Who are at the top of that list?
So there's a couple people, there's two people that I sort of point to as mentors that I actually got to really work with. And the first was Lou Dawson, who I mentioned. Lou was a pioneering ski mountaineer in Colorado and also in the Alps and other places, and was really a great storyteller. Also, that was a big part of it. He was sharing. I think when I moved to Boulder, Colorado in the fall of 1989 as a freshman in college, one of the first things I did was walk into Neptune Mountaineering, local mountaineering store, and I bought Lou Dawson's book, his guide to the 14ers. And it wasn't just a guide to hiking or climbing the 14ers, it was a guide to skiing. And I thought that was the book is literally sitting right behind me and I look at it still to this day. When I got that book and then I finally was able to meet Lou, and this is years prior to me doing the 14ers project, I just liked the way he carried himself and was well-spoken and well-written and well-read and was just, full of information that he wanted to share with other people, which was great. So he was definitely an early mentor. But even before Lou, the person I would, I guess, point to number one or first is Doug Coombs. And I met Doug on my very first trip to South America, to Las Leñas, Argentina in 1994. I went down there with a group of Aspen friends. A couple of them were already good friends with Doug, and met Doug and got to ski with him. And of course, I knew of him. He had already won the World Extreme Skiing Championships and, was skiing things in the Tetons. And so we got to ski some really cool lines in Las Leñas. And towards the end of the trip, he grabbed a pair of Alpine Trekkers that he had. Backcountry Access made these, ski touring adapters that you would put into your Alpine bindings. And he held them up and looked at me and handed them to me. He said, "I think you're going to really need these," and gave me his Alpine Trekkers.
And they were like brand new that year, right? That was the year they came out, like right around there.
Exactly. And I still have them. And it's it's in the Davenport Ski Museum, if you will. And so that was pretty inspiring. So he inspired me to start doing more in the backcountry, in the big mountains. And then I ended up, going to Alaska in 1996 and winning the World Championships and becoming closer to Doug on that trip. I was up there for a few weeks. And then the following year, he ended up hiring me at Valdez Heli-Ski to be a heli-ski guide. And unfortunately, the timing this is one of the more regrettable things, but I had torn my knee. I'd torn my ACL that spring and was unable to work for him. And I even had the guide jacket that he handed me. And I was I was over the moon that I was going to be able to work with him and learn from him. So I didn't get to end up working with him, but we continued to ski together over the years. And I would go up to Jackson Hole and backcountry ski with him. And he was another person who just held himself with very little ego, very humble, very gracious with people, super friendly, and he was like a cat. When you watched him ski, it looked so effortless. He used very little energy and he was so smooth, and he was, really working hard at becoming a better guide and, eventually opening up some business in Le Grave, France, and moving his family over there. And then I went and skied with him in Le Grave. And so just always looked up to the way Doug did things. And I'll never forget where I was in April of 2006. I was skiing the 14ers and came off of a mountain down in the San Juans and eventually got cell reception. And my old Nokia analog cell phone blew up with text messages, and like 26 of them. And I'm like, oh my God, that's obviously not normal. Something's happened. And I start listening to these text messages and people are like, "Hey, I'm so sorry to hear about Doug. I'm, sorry." And I'm like, "What happened?" And, Doug Coombs had died in Le Grave. And that was a real shock for me because I felt like in many ways, he was kind of invincible. Like he just seemed like so knowledgeable and so smart and safe. And so it was really introspective for me as I was like, if that could happen to Doug, what am I doing? I'm out here skiing all these peaks. I have a family. I've already got 2 kids. And I had to really take a step back for a few days and just get my head around what had happened to him, because I just couldn't fathom that could happen to Doug. But my wife is like, well, part of me wants you to stop doing what you're doing because it's dangerous. The other part of me knows that Doug would want you to keep going. And so that was kind of the thought process there. But yeah, he was just a super friend and mentor.
I can't think of two more exceptional people myself.
I'm very fortunate that I got to spend time with both of them. Yeah. And of course, Lou's still here.
Of course. So both Doug and Lou obviously came to the game with an incredible drive, quite frankly, different types of personalities. Really, those guys are different types of people, and they're just so interesting. Clearly the mental game and the discipline and how you process. I mean, we've got the physical component of it. You got to be fit and you got to be out there a lot. You've already had this high volume of skiing in your life. Did you pick up anything from those guys about how to think in the mountains? And how did you merge that with what you naturally have, which is clearly a gift?
I love that question because I did pick up things from them. As you mentioned, there's the physical side, of course, being an athlete, being well-trained or whatever, these things are physical, they take effort. But the mental side is equally, if not more important. And one of the things that Doug taught me, and we had this conversation around fluency in the mountains. And when I say that, it's like, imagine the mountains speak their own language. And it's up to us as humans to kind of understand that language. And when you become fluent or get a high degree of fluency, you start seeing and feeling things out there. It's like your intuition, right? Especially with snow, with weather. The mountains are talking to us all the time, and they don't hide anything. All the signs and signals are out there. We just have to see them and hear them and feel them and interpret them. And so I picked up that from Doug. I'm not a hunter, but I think some of my friends that are really into hunting, they almost become like one with the animal, the breathing and the smell and the scent and I don't know, all the things. I feel like that I'm the same way when it comes to being out in the mountains. I like to feel like I'm plugged in. It's funny, if you watch the blockbuster movie Avatar, the people, they're plugged into nature. They're connected to the natural environment around them in a way I'd like to think humans were, thousands of years ago. And we're not nowadays, or most of us aren't. And I love that connection, that human nature connection. And that's that language of the mountains, I like to call it. And I'm still learning all the time, getting better. And I work with my clients on that when we're out in the backcountry. I'm like, hey, let's take a moment here and be quiet and just feel what's going on around us. What are you picking up on? Maybe it's something with the snow transport, with the wind, or the weather's changing or whatever. And just kind of being tactical in a way, feeling what's going on around you. So I don't want to go too much into that because it gets a little esoteric, but it's something that has been really important to me on the mental side, is just that feeling of being plugged into nature. The other side of the mental thing that has allowed me to do what I've done is I think just the fact that I love this so much. I'm so full of passion every day that I get to put my boots on and be out there, summer, winter, whether it's on skis or on a bike or on a paraglider or on a rock climb. I just love it. When you have that passion, I think you can do really great things. And perhaps it means you're out there for the right reason.
Well, Chris, the mountains have a language and you understand it. And I thank you for helping us translate it a little bit today.
Well, thanks. It's so fun to talk about these sports that we love and just the natural world around us. And I don't know when you and I are going to ski together again, but it sure was fun skiing the White Continent the last couple of weeks.
Well, let's make it again soon. Thanks, Chris.
Great, Howie. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to the Backcountry Podcast and for supporting independent media. The Backcountry Podcast is produced by Backcountry Magazine, an imprint of Height of Land Publications in Jeffersonville, Vermont. Backcountry's small but mighty staff works hard to bring you stories that are beautifully produced, thoughtfully edited, and thoroughly fact-checked. Betsy Monero is our editor-in-chief. Mike Horn is our podcast producer and engineer. Our music was composed by Alex Paul. Please consider supporting independent journalism by subscribing at backcountrymagazine.com. Use code PODCAST for 10% off your entire order. I'm Adam Howard. Thanks for listening. Until next time, we'll see you in the backcountry.